What did your mother-in-law do that made you change all the locks? I have been married to my husband for 3 years, and we're currently expecting our first child. On paper, it sounds like the perfect little life. We're both excited, scared, and counting down the weeks until we get to meet our baby. But behind the smiles and ultrasound pictures, there's a tension that has been eating at me. One that has nothing to do with the pregnancy itself. It's about my mother-in-law. She lives about 20 minutes away, which at first sounded convenient. Close enough that she could help if we needed her, but not so close that she'd be underfoot all the time. Or at least, that's what I thought. From the very beginning, she's had this habit of just dropping by. No calls, no texts, no warning. Just showing up at the door and letting herself in as if she lived here too. At first, it was annoying but manageable. She'd pop in, bring some groceries, fuss about how we were keeping the place, maybe stay for coffee. I told myself she was just excited, just being a mom, maybe even lonely. My husband would shrug whenever I complained and say, "That's just how she is." He meant it like it was harmless, but it never sat right with me. But things got worse after I got pregnant. This pregnancy has been hard on me, harder than I expected. The nausea, the exhaustion, the nights spent tossing and turning because no position feels right. I've had days where just making it from the bed to the couch felt like climbing a mountain. Rest became precious. Sleep was sacred. I needed space, quiet, and privacy. And that was exactly what she couldn't seem to give me. Last month, it crossed a line. I was napping in the middle of the day, desperate for a few hours of relief. I woke up to the sound of the bedroom door opening, and there she was, standing by my bed. She had let herself in with the spare key we'd given her for emergencies. Her excuse? She was checking on me. I remember blinking up at her, groggy and disoriented, my heart racing from the shock. She just stood there, watching me sleep. I told my husband later how uncomfortable it made me, how creepy it felt, like I had no safe space in my own house. He brushed it off. "She's just being motherly," he said. "She worries about you." I wanted to scream. Worrying about me is one thing. Standing over me while I'm unconscious in my underwear is another. And then it happened again. Not once. Twice. The second time was even worse. I had dozed off in the middle of the afternoon wearing only a t-shirt and underwear. I woke to find her sitting at the edge of my bed, chatting like it was the most natural thing in the world. I remember pulling the blanket over myself, cheeks burning with humiliation. I told her firmly I needed privacy, that I needed her to stop coming into my bedroom uninvited. She smiled, nodded, and ignored me completely. That night, I went to the hardware store and bought a new doorknob for our bedroom, one with a lock. My hands actually shook as I installed it, but once it clicked into place, I felt like I could finally breathe again. For the first time in months, I felt like I had at least one corner of the house that was mine, where I could rest without fearing the sound of the door opening. But of course, the next time she came by, she discovered it. She tried the handle, found it locked, knocked repeatedly, and then called my husband at work in a panic. She told him she was worried something had happened because I didn't answer. Later that night, she called me controlling and rude. She said I was already shutting her out of her grandchild's life. My husband asked me to just take the lock off to keep the peace. He looked at me like this was some silly overreaction. I told him no. I told him his mother didn't respect boundaries and that the lock stays. He sighed and said nothing, but I could feel the weight of his silence. Now, his whole family is chiming in. They say I'm dramatic, that my pregnancy hormones are making me paranoid. And maybe I doubt myself if it wasn't so clear. She doesn't see me as a person with boundaries. She sees me as an extension of her son, and the baby as an extension of herself. I sit here now, alone in my locked bedroom, wondering how far this will go. After that first argument about the lock, things didn't calm down. They got worse. I had hoped my husband would see how serious I was, maybe even back me up the next time his mother tried to push her way in. Instead, he just kept repeating the same tired line. "That's just how she is." And the thing is, I was starting to hate that phrase. Just because that's how she is doesn't mean it's okay. If a stranger walked into our bedroom while I was asleep, everyone would call it creepy and unacceptable. But because it was his mother, suddenly it was excused. Suddenly I was supposed to laugh it off, chalk it up to her quirks, and be understanding. But I couldn't. I was exhausted. Pregnancy had taken every bit of energy I had, and the little I managed to hold on to was being drained by this constant tension. Every time I closed my eyes for a nap, I worried I'd wake up to her face hovering over mine. I started locking the bedroom even during the day, just so I could feel safe. And yes, that's the word I use. Safe, because it no longer felt like simple annoyance. It felt like a violation. One Saturday, she dropped by again. I had the door locked, of course. She tried the handle, then knocked louder and louder. When I didn't get up, because honestly I was done playing hostess, she left. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Are you really going to keep me out of my grandbaby's life? What kind of mother will you be if you shut out family like this?" I stared at the words on the screen, my heart pounding. It wasn't about me resting. It wasn't about her checking anymore. This was about control. That evening, she cornered my husband. I could hear her voice through the phone, shrill and insistent. When he hung up, he turned to me and said, "Could you just try to meet her halfway? She feels unwanted." Because she is unwanted when she barges into my bedroom. I snapped. My voice cracked, half from anger, half from exhaustion. Does she feel invited when she sits on our bed while I'm half naked? Does that sound normal to you? He rubbed his forehead like I was giving him a headache. I'm just trying to keep the peace. That phrase burned me worse than anything, because keeping the peace always seemed to mean me sacrificing my boundaries. It never meant his mother changing her behavior. The pressure didn't stop there. His sister called me the next day pretending to check in. It only took 5 minutes for the guilt trip to start. She said things like, "Mom's just excited about her first grandchild, and you know how pregnancy hormones can make people overly sensitive." I bit my tongue until it nearly bled, then ended the call as politely as I could. But after I hung up, I cried. Not just little tears, but the kind that come in waves you can't control. Because it hit me. Nobody in that family cared how I felt. Nobody was defending me. They all saw me as a gatekeeper to the baby, and they resented me for daring to close the gate even a little. A week later, my husband and I went to a family dinner at his parents' house. I almost didn't want to go, but I thought maybe if I showed up, they'd see I wasn't trying to isolate anyone. Big mistake. We hadn't even finished our plates before his mother brought it up, right in front of everyone. "So, are you really going to keep locking me out of my own grandchild's life?" she asked in that mocking sweet tone people use when they want to make you look bad. The room went quiet. Forks clinked against plates, and I felt every eye on me. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I'm locking my bedroom, not your grandchild." She tilted her head like I just said something outrageous. "Same thing. If you're shutting me out now, what happens when the baby's born? Are you going to put a lock on the nursery too?" Her words stung because part of me had already thought about it. I'd already pictured her walking in unannounced while I was nursing, barging into moments that were supposed to be private. Before I could answer, my father-in-law cleared his throat and said quietly, "Maybe we should drop it." But the damage was done. My cheeks were hot and I felt exposed like I was on trial. The car ride home was silent until I broke it. "You heard her. You heard how she twisted everything, and you just sat there." My husband tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "What do you want me to do? Fight with my mom in front of everyone?" "I want you to defend your wife," I shot back. "I want you to care about how humiliating that was for me." He didn't answer. The silence between us said more than words ever could. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, one hand on my belly, feeling the baby shift. I promised silently that I'd protect this child, even if it meant protecting myself from people who claim to love us. And for the first time, I thought about the front door, about the spare key still sitting in her purse, about how, as long as she had it, there was no real boundary at all. The thought of the front door key sat in my head like a splinter. Once you notice it, you can't ignore it. Every time I heard a car outside, every creak of the floorboards, I imagined her walking in. Not knocking, not asking, just letting herself in because she could. I brought it up with my husband one evening while we were folding baby clothes on the couch. The little onesies were soft in my hands, bright and new, but my voice came out sharp. "We need to get that key back from your mom." He looked at me like I just suggested we kick her out of the family. "It's for emergencies. What if something happens and we're not home?" I laughed bitterly. "Like what? A fire? The neighbors would call 911 before your mom even got in the car. The only emergencies she uses it for are her own curiosity." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You're making it sound sinister. She just worries about you." "No," I said, my voice firm. "She doesn't worry. She intrudes. There's a difference." He didn't argue further, but he didn't agree either, and that silence told me everything. A few days later, my fear was proven right. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the front door open. No knock, no warning. She walked in, carrying a grocery bag like she owned the place. "Oh, sweetheart, I brought you some fruit," she chirped, setting the bag down on the counter. "Pregnant women need vitamins, you know." I clenched my jaw. "You can't just walk in here. You need to call first." She waved a hand like I was being silly. "I didn't want to wake you if you were napping." This way is easier for her, not for me. I let it go that time, but the unease lingered. Every time I locked the bedroom door, I thought about how the front door was still wide open to her. Then came the day that snapped something inside me. I had just gotten out of the shower, hair dripping, towel around me, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. I froze, heart pounding. My husband wasn't home. Slowly, I peeked out, and there she was, standing outside the nursery, smiling at the little crib we'd set up. "Oh, I just wanted to see how things are coming along," she said casually, like it wasn't completely insane to walk in on me half-dressed in my own home. I remember clutching the towel tighter and saying, "You need to leave." Now she frowned, her lips pursing like I was a rude child. "Don't be dramatic. I'm just excited about the baby." But I didn't move, and after an uncomfortable pause, she finally left, muttering something under her breath. When my husband came home, I told him what happened. His face tightened, but his words were the same. She didn't mean anything by it. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking with anger. "Do you realize what just happened? Your mother walked into our house while I was practically naked, and you're still defending her. She's just trying to be involved," he said quietly. "Involved?" I snapped. "There's involved, and then there's invasive. This isn't normal." He didn't answer. He just pulled off his shirt and got into bed like the conversation was over. But for me, it wasn't over. It was just beginning. The next morning, I started researching locksmiths. I didn't announce my plan. I just picked a morning when my husband was on an early shift, fed myself a plain bagel I could keep down, and called a locksmith. My hand shook a little when I gave the address. He said he could be there in an hour. I walked through the house while I waited, touching doorknobs like they were bruises. Front door, back door, garage entry, the little side door nobody uses until suddenly they do. Every one of them was a way in for someone who believed family meant access on demand. The locksmith was kind in the way practical people are. He laid out options, explained rekeying versus replacing, didn't comment on the way I hovered with one hand on my belly. I told him I wanted everything changed. Same key for all exterior doors, new deadbolts, strike plates that meant business. While he worked, the house sounded different. Careful drilling, metal clicking into place, the small, decisive sound of a cylinder turning and becoming mine. By the time he finished, I had 3 fresh keys on a ring and a receipt that felt like proof I was allowed to protect myself. I texted my husband a photo of the keys with a simple message. I changed the locks. I'll give you yours when you get home. I stared at the screen, waiting for the typing bubbles. Nothing came for 10 long minutes. Then, we need to talk. Of course we did. I hadn't meant for the first test to be immediate, but life likes a scene. An hour later, I heard tires in the gravel and the familiar click of the old key trying the front door. A pause, another try, then knuckles on wood, harder this time. I stood in the hallway and watched the baby monitor's green light blink like a tiny metronome. The knocking became a rap, then the doorbell, then my phone. "Hi," I said, voice even. "Why is your door locked?" Her tone was already injured, like I'd slammed it in her face. "My key doesn't work. We rekeyed the house," I said. "For safety. Please text before you come by." "But I'm here now," she said, as if that solved it. "Open the door." "I'm not up for a visit," I answered. "I'm resting." And I was, resting for the first time without that constant thrum of being watched. She inhaled sharply. "So I'm shut out now? From my grandbaby? This is what you wanted." "I'm locking my doors," I said. "That's all." She hung up. The doorbell rang twice more and then the car pulled away. I stood there shaking, not from fear but from the adrenaline of doing something irreversible. I locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked, and let my body believe me. When my husband came home, he held the new key like it might burn him. "You did this without talking to me," he said. "We have been talking," I answered. "For months. You just keep hoping I'll cave." He set his bag down and rubbed the back of his neck. "She called me crying at work, said you slammed the door in her face." "I didn't slam anything," I answered. I explained, and I kept the boundary. I put the second key on the counter and slid it toward him. "You live here." "She doesn't." He looked at the key and not at me. "It feels extreme." "What feels extreme," I said, slower now, "is waking up half naked to your mother sitting on my bed. What feels extreme is a grown woman using an emergency key to stage surprise inspections. What feels extreme is the fact that you're angrier at a deadbolt than at the person who made it necessary." He exhaled, long and tired, and for a second I saw the boy in him, the one who learned early that keeping the peace meant aligning yourself with the loudest person in the room. "I don't want a war," he said. "Then stop making me fight it alone." We ate in a truce that tasted like cardboard. After dinner, his phone lit up with the family group chat. I watched the messages stack like kindling. "Can't believe she changed the locks. Who does that to family? She must be really spiraling with those hormones." His sister added a smiley face like that, turned it into care. His father sent a single, "Let's all calm down," which is family code for "I won't get involved." I didn't respond. I wasn't in there to begin with. Instead, I texted his mother one line on my own thread. "Please text before you come. We'll set times that work for everyone after the baby's here." It was the most generous version of what I felt. She didn't reply. 2 days later, she tried again, this time with props. I heard the car, the careful footsteps, and then her knock, light and maternal, like she was about to bless a sick child. I opened the door with the chain on. She stood on the stoop, holding a glass casserole with foil crimped over the top. "I made lasagna for my boys," she said, eyes darting past my shoulder into the hallway. "Can I leave it on the counter?" "You can hand it to me," I said. "Thank you." I reached through the gap and took the warm weight from her hands. She did the small, wounded smile. "You're really gonna keep this chain up? I can't even come in for a minute." "I'm resting," I repeated. "It's been a tough week." "You know," she said, lowering her voice into the tone people use when they're about to be unkind but want it to land as concern. "This isn't a healthy way to start a family. Shutting people out only makes things worse." "I'm not shutting people out," I said. "I'm closing my bedroom door. I'm locking my house. Those aren't the same thing." She straightened, the softness gone. "I raised a good son. He knows better than to lock his mother out. He knows how to use a key," I said, and shut the door gently but firmly. I stood there until I heard her footsteps retreat. Then I put the casserole in the fridge and cried for 5 minutes. The kind of hard, tidy crying that leaves your face hot and your resolve intact. That night, I told my husband exactly what visits would look like going forward. He didn't love it, but he listened. Weekends, midday, text first, no popping into bedrooms, no drop-bys that lasted 3 hours and ended with critiques about our furniture placement. He asked if we could ease up after the baby came. I said we could revisit it if trust returned. He didn't ask what that would take. Maybe because he knew the answer was time and proof and a new pattern that wasn't built on my compliance. His mother pivoted tactics. Instead of doorbell demands, she sent running commentary. "Have you picked a pediatrician? Send me your birth plan so I can make sure it's realistic. I'll be in the delivery room, right?" I was there for SIL, and it made it so special. The last one made my skin prickle. I typed, deleted, typed again, and finally wrote, "We'll let you know when we're ready for visitors after delivery. It will just be the 2 of us in the room." She fired back a paragraph about tradition and support and how she couldn't believe I'd exclude her from her grandchild's first breath. I put my phone face down and breathed in the quiet of the room we had reclaimed. There was one more test I didn't see coming. A delivery guy was dropping off a box of diapers, and as I signed on his little screen, a car door slammed. She had timed her arrival to the sound of commerce, slid in behind him toward the threshold like a tailgater through a security gate. "Oh good, you're up," she said, already angling her shoulder against the half-open door. "I'll just pop in and—" "No," I said, body blocking without thinking. "Not today." She blinked, surprised I'd physically occupied the space she considers hers by right. For a second, I saw her take the measure of me. The belly, the bare face, the tired in my eyes, and realize I wasn't going to fold. Then she smiled a hard little smile that didn't reach her eyes and stepped back. "Your hormones are making you crazy," she said, like a benediction. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but I won't regret keeping my doors locked." After she left, I sat on the floor in the hallway and let the house be quiet around me. The baby hiccuped under my palm like a tiny drummer. I traced the outline of the new deadbolt with my thumb and felt, for the first time in months, something like peace that didn't feel borrowed. Changing the locks didn't fix everything. It didn't rewrite my husband's reflex to appease or teach his family the difference between access and love. But it did something simpler, and for now more important. It put the boundary in wood and steel so I wasn't the only thing holding the line. And that was the day I realized I could breathe in my own home again without waiting for a key I didn't control to turn in a door that was supposed to be mine. I thought the new locks would quiet everything down. For a few blessed days, it did. The house hummed the way houses do when they're finally left alone, a low, contented sound like a refrigerator at night. I slept in short, clean pieces, not the kind of sleep that's really just listening. Then my mother-in-law changed tactics. When doors don't open, some people look for windows. She started sending third parties. A cousin I barely know texted to say she happened to be in the neighborhood and could drop off a bundle of hand-me-down onesies. An old family friend rang to ask if we needed a crib assembled, and wouldn't it be easier if someone with experience popped in and did it? A neighbor I had waved to twice showed up with a pie and a rehearsed line about how she'd promised my mother-in-law she would make sure you're eating. I stood on the threshold like a bouncer at my own life, saying thank you through the gap, keeping the chain on, balancing gratitude with no. It felt ridiculous and necessary at the same time. My husband, to his credit, started to look uncomfortable. He'd read the messages over my shoulder and go quiet in a new way, like even he could see how coordinated it all was. But the reflex to appease is bone deep. He still angled for compromise, still asked if we could take the chain off just for a minute, or let her drop something inside, so no one felt unwelcome. I kept repeating the same sentence until it stopped shaking. I am not obliged to make intrusions comfortable. The escalation I didn't expect arrived on a Tuesday, rain ticking against the windows, the kind of day where you count kicks and drink warm things. Someone knocked 3 times, official and even. I opened the door with the chain and found 2 uniforms on the stoop. A welfare check, they said. Someone had called and reported that a pregnant woman here wasn't answering, might be in distress. They were professional, kind, apologetic even, but my hands still went cold. I answered their questions, showed them me and the belly and the messy living room and the clean sink, the ordinary signs of life. They left with nods and wishes for an easy delivery. The minute their boots hit the sidewalk, my phone lit up. "Are you okay? I sent officers because you won't answer your door." She had typed it like a good deed. I called my husband and told him I was done explaining. He came home early, eyes wet at the edges, saying he hadn't known she'd go that far, that in her mind, worry justifies anything. In mine, it didn't. I told him I would be putting things in writing because apparently spoken boundaries only count as weather. He didn't argue. That night, with the house finally still, I wrote a visitor policy the way clinics write theirs. I kept it simple. Human, no drop-bys, text first, visits scheduled in advance, no entering bedrooms, no keys held by anyone but us, postpartum visits delayed until we say ready. He read it, swallowed, and said he would send it to his family. I watched him type the group message, watched him hit send, watched the bubbles bloom. His sister sent back a paragraph about tradition. His father asked to be kept in the loop. His mother posted a single heart and then called him instead of me. The next morning, I brought the policy to my OB appointment. I told my doctor what had been happening. The surprise entries, the bed, the welfare check, the way my chest tightened every time a car slowed outside. She listened without the face people make when they think you're being dramatic. She said stress isn't a character flaw, it's a load. She wrote a note I could wave like a flag if I needed it, stating plainly that rest and limited visitors were medically recommended. On the way out, I booked a short session with the hospital's social worker because sometimes you need someone official to stand behind you when family refuses to see you. On the drive home, I called a doula a friend had recommended and asked if she would be willing to be the bad cop if it came to that. She laughed softly and said that was half the job. We talked through a plan for the hospital. No one in the delivery room but my husband. No one in the waiting room unless we invite them. No one told we've been admitted until we are ready. The doula said she would be the one to say not now at the door. The relief I felt was immediate. Cheap oxygen in a thin room. My mother-in-law tried one more angle that week. She arrived with a woman she introduced as a nurse friend, which turned out to mean someone who had once worked as a CNA and now did elder care. The 2 of them stood on my porch like a traveling troupe, the nurse friend beaming in her scrubs, my mother-in-law wearing the triumph of a person who believes credentials can bully a boundary. I kept the chain on, said hello, and waited. "We're here to check your swelling and blood pressure," my mother-in-law announced, like she'd booked an appointment on my behalf. "You didn't answer my texts, and I got concerned." "I have a doctor," I said. "I saw her yesterday. This is just a friendly check. The friend chimed in, lifting a cuff like a magic wand. I'm not opening the door, I said, voice steady. If you set a time with me in advance, I might accept a porch visit, but I don't consent to medical anything from strangers on my stoop. My mother-in-law huffed and performed a fence for the neighbor's security camera. You're being hostile. This is hospitality. We care about the baby. I do too, I said. That's why I'm protecting my rest, my privacy, and my decisions. They left in a flurry of wounded indignation and rain, the nurse friend apologizing with her eyes as she followed. When the car finally pulled away, I sat down on the entry rug and laughed once, hard and humorless. Then I texted my husband a summary so there would be no creative retellings later. He called immediately, said he was sorry, said he'd talk to her. I told him talking wasn't the currency that works on her. Consequences were, so he tried one. He told her there would be a 2-week pause on visits of any kind, porch or otherwise, until she agreed to the visitor policy. He said it calmly, and I could hear in his voice how much it cost him to set that line. She hung up on him, then sent me a message that managed to be both scathing and saccharine. I didn't answer. Silence can be a boundary too. The pause was beautiful. 14 days where the doorbell didn't ring unless it was a delivery driver. 14 days where I learned the rhythms of my own breath again. I prepped tiny drawers, washed tiny socks, ate on the couch without bracing. My husband came home and, for the first time, seemed to choose us on purpose, turning his phone face down, asking me where something should go and accepting my answer as final. The quiet re-taught us who we were when we weren't managing anyone else's expectations. On day 15, she texted to accept the policy, every sentence bristling with resentment. Fine. If resentment is the price of compliance, I can live with that. We scheduled a short porch visit for the weekend, set a timer on the counter like we were baking a boundary. She arrived on time, brought a plan I didn't want, and a smile that didn't reach, and for 20 minutes asked questions I could answer with one syllable. When the timer chimed, I thanked her for coming and said goodbye. She looked stunned, then recovered and tried to angle for just a peek at the nursery. I shook my head. She left with the plant's plastic crinkling like applause. That night, lying on my left side with a pillow fortress, I realized something I hadn't been able to say out loud. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of her, not of her group chats, not of being labeled dramatic or hormonal or controlling. Those words are the tools people use when they don't want to change. I was building something else. A home where yes means yes and no means no. Where keys belong to the people who live here. Where the bedroom is a place you have to be invited into, even if you share a last name with the person on the other side. We were not done. Families like this don't surrender all at once. They probe and retreat, test and regroup. But the frame had shifted. The lock was literal and metaphorical, and both were holding. The baby rolled under my palm like a fish, and I whispered the promise I'd been practicing since the day I tightened the last screw on the new deadbolt. You get a peaceful mother if I can build one, and I'm building her, right here, one closed door at a time.